connecting as a human being is useful in all circumstances, even adversarial. I remember we arrested a guy one time, white collar crime arrest. 5 of us rolled in his dude's house, and he wasn't a dangerous guy. But I can see in a look on his face that he's thinking about running. And he's going to get injured. I mean, if we tackle him, no matter how hard we try, we got to twist his arm. He's going to get bruised up at least. And this is just unnecessary. And I can see him looking around. And I just go, look at me. And I go, here's what's going to happen. We're going to take you into custody. You're going to make bond. You're going to be back out of jail by the end of the day. You're connected to your attorney. There's no reason for you to get hurt. And it just relaxed. And we took him out of there. And we put the cuffs on him. I could admit when we got back to the office, my colleagues went, where's that guy every day? The guy we deal with is a lot harsher than that. You're actually a nice guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not locking you guys up.
On today's episode, we have author and former FBI negotiator, Chris Voss. Steve, Chris is the real deal. We've read his books, We've seen him on podcasts, and he's an expert negotiator. He's amazing, and he did not disappoint on this episode. He really came with everything he had.
Jake, this podcast was a blast, and having Chris on our show and actually delving into some of the issues of tactical empathy and when no is better than yes,
yep,
and how he got into negotiations was just a treat. Mm-hmm. And it's like, Jake, you've said many a times, our whole life is a negotiation, whether it's family or kids or et cetera. This was a great show. Yeah. And like negotiations, you have to keep on practicing to be better.
Yeah, that's so right. Yeah, like you said, negotiations aren't just in businesses or hostage situations. It could be as simple as, hey, where do you want to go to dinner tonight? And so even if you don't own a business, even if you're not in investing or anything like that, this is a book and this is a podcast that can benefit you. So tune in. But let's just head west. So stay tuned as we discuss negotiating like your life depended on it, when no is better than yes, and the perils of reading body language with our guest, Chris Voss. This episode is brought to you by Skyline Point Capital. If you're anything like me, you're always considering where to invest your money. Stocks, bonds, crypto, and rental home, the list is literally endless. As we've all seen over the past year, the stock market is unstable, the housing market is just weird, and inflation is on the rise. In times like these, the clear place to invest my money is in multifamily real estate, aka apartment complexes. Here's why. Returns on real estate investments have little to no correlation with the stock market. There's lower volatility, stable income streams, and the tax benefits are insane. And let's not forget that the apartments will typically appreciate in value over time, which means you can walk away with a pretty nice return when the complex is sold in 3 to 5 years. Best of all, multifamily investing is passive, so you get all of the benefits without the hassle and headache of your typical rental home investment. Getting started has never been easier. Head to skylinepointcapital.com to learn how you can start investing today. Well, Chris, most of our viewers are going to be familiar with you. You're a well-known entity. If they haven't read your book, which most of our audience probably has because they're business owners, they're real estate investors, they've at least seen you on a podcast. Lex Friedman's, Andrew Huberman's, I mean, you name it, you've been on it. So I'm sure they're well familiar with you and your story, especially of going from an FBI lead negotiator, hostage situations, high intensity situations, to authoring a book, becoming a consultant, to really a teacher and a coach for how to negotiate. So where I feel like it would be a fun place to start is really to explore the in-between, right? To begin our conversation of how did you transition from FBI negotiator into authoring a book, and what ultimately led you to actually putting thoughts and all your training and everything into this awesome book?
Yeah. Well, I always suspected that the skills applied to everyday life, starting when I volunteered on the crisis hotline in New York in the 1990s, early 90s at that. Why should only people in crisis be the recipients of empathy? Not sympathy, but empathy. So then I started experimenting using it in my personal and professional life, applied it across the board. When I got out of the bureau, immediately people were encouraging me, write a book, write a book, write a book. Like you don't have credibility if you haven't written a book. And I didn't feel like we had the system built from end to end. So I was lucky enough to start teaching at Georgetown and getting proof of concept. You know, I made the students in my class in the MBA program apply the hostage negotiation skills, which became the black swan skills in their everyday life, and then do papers writing up how it went and what were the outcome. And people just started hitting it out of the park. And so after we had enough proof of concept in the real world, then it was time to put together a book. I wanted to make sure we had a system from end to end. And that took a few years. I left the bureau in 2009. The book came out in 2016. We got superstar writer Tal Ross, and he made the magic happen.
I love that. So can you walk us through what were some of those everyday situations that you said, all right, I'm going to test this out. I've done it in high stakes negotiations with hostages, but kind of walk us through what were a few of the ones that you just started. Was it buying coffee? Was it, buying a home? What did that look like?
Yeah, well, the hotline, you really learn just to read emotions and reflect back what your read is. Tell them what you read. They called it reflection on the hostage negotiation or on the hotline. And it was really emotional labeling. It seems like you're angry. It seems like you're angry, but you're probably hurt. I began to really learn that emotions were often a result. If you're angry, it's a result of something else. Usually you've been hurt. And so I just started reading people's emotions in my everyday interactions, mostly my colleagues, because most of your conversations are with your colleagues on a daily basis. And I'd start feeding back to them what emotions I was reading. And I remember one in particular said, "You're reading my mind." And I said, "No, I'm reading your emotions, but consequently, I get a read of your mind from that." So just all my interactions, my everyday interactions, and then learning how to connect with people, how to get people's attention. I remember we arrested a guy one time, white collar crime arrest. It was a big sweep. We went out. There were probably 15, 20 arrest teams went out. We went out to arrest this guy. 5 of us rolled into this dude's house, and he wasn't a dangerous guy. But it was a plan. It was a protocol. And the Bureau tends to stay out of gunfights because we bring more people in, and it just doesn't make sense if you're by yourself to get into a gunfight with 7 guys. You're going to give up. You're, out of survival. So we take about 5 guys in this guy's house, this white-collar criminal, not a big dude, not a big dangerous dude. But I can see in a look on his face that he's thinking about running. And he's going to get injured. I mean, if we tackle him, no matter how hard we try, we got to twist his arm. He's going to get bruised up at least. And this is just unnecessary because, we're going to lock him up. It's white collar. He's going to make bond. And he's not going to do any heavy amount of time. Who knows? He might not do any time at all. So there's no point in this guy getting hurt. And I can see him looking around. And I just go, "Look at me." Because I needed to get his attention. A little bit like Chili Palmer and Get Short. He used to always say to people, "Look at me." But instead of following up by being menacing, when we lock eyes, I go, "I'm Chris." And so it's the opening line from a hostage negotiation. It's the opening line to an introduction. You can walk up to people and say, "I'm Chris." And you let them look at you in the eye and connect. And he looked at me and he calmed down. And he felt the connection with a person instead of the FBI agents that are there to lock him up. And I go, "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to take you into custody. You're going to make bond. You're going to be back out of jail by the end of the day. You connect with your attorney. There's no reason for you to get hurt here." And he just relaxed. And we took him out of there. We put the cuffs on him. I could admit when we got back to the office, my colleagues went, Where's that guy every day? The guy we deal with is a lot harsher than that. You're actually a nice guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not locking you guys up.
Boy, you lay that late night voice on anybody, they're gonna stop whatever they're doing.
Yeah. And then I just connected as a human
Yeah.
being. So I thought connecting as a human being is useful in all circumstances, even adversarial ones.
Chris, it sounds like it's more important how you say it than what you actually say.
Well, tonality is like putting a spin on a bullet. It's whether or not it lands. And so tonality is step one. And if your tonality is only great, it's amazing what you can get away saying. And so I would start out with the opener. You want your words to land how you say it, tonality, inflection, whether you're inflecting down or whether you're inflecting up. Like there's some mastery there that I really used to always focus on downward inflection. Till I read Jordan Belfort's book, The Way of the Wolf. I like Jordan. I have a social media show on an app called Fireside. Jordan's been a guest on that. I've been a guest on his podcast. I learned from everybody. And when I read his book, I think it was chapter 7 on tonality, he talked about the tone of inquisitiveness, the upward inflection. And I bang, that's it. There's a piece that I hadn't fully considered before. And no matter what you think of Jordan Belfort, he was good at what he did. And he's still very good at sales conversations. So tonality, and that's a piece that I learned from Belfort to be aware of. He's a smart dude. I like his thinking.
And then on the downward inflection as compared to the upward inflection.
Yeah, downward is, I get it. And there's a neural trigger there. It's a soothing, calming voice that actually slows the brain down. And if I can slow your brain down, I'll slow your emotions down. When negative emotions are out of control. You called it the late night FM DJ voice. It was a voice that hostage negotiators are taught to use from the very beginning, which is the only thing that really flips between hostage negotiation and business negotiation. We teach people to use, the happy smiling voice. And if you smile, people can actually feel it because it's a neural connection. In business, use that voice 80% of the time, 10 to 20% the downward inflecting voice. I get it. You give the other side confidence in you. It builds their confidence in you when you use the downward inflection. It's great TV news anchors, great anchors. Not the clickbait, stir the population up type people. Wolf Blitzer, I think, has a great downward inflecting voice. It gives a feeling of confidence, and that confidence is contagious. And so then the upward inflecting voice, in place of asking a question or to get a word to land, we teach some very counterintuitive skills. And I will say one of them, when I got a day-long training in the morning, I'm going to say labeling negatives that don't yet exist inoculates people. It doesn't plant them. That's one of the things that we teach that's the scariest of all. People think they're going to speak the devil into existence. If I label a negative, you're going to get negative. And a point of fact that inoculates from it. So we'll teach that in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we got a whole strategy called the accusations on it. We'll go through it. Somebody will raise their hand and they'll say, but won't that plant the negative? Now I can say, when I told you it won't plant the negative, but inoculate it this morning, you thought I was a liar. Now that gets close to an accusation. But if I say, when I told you this morning that speaking a negative in advance doesn't plant it, but inoculates from it, you thought I was a liar? Well, the second one will land. Exact same words. So, you asked me if it was more important on a relative scale. It's a larger percentage of the communication. It's what really enhances how your words land.
Earlier in our discussion, you had touched on it and Steve had teased it out a little bit. this thing that you talk about frequently is looks like, seems like, feels like. Can you explain that concept a little bit? Why it's so powerful and what's going on internally into the person hearing it?
Well, that aspect's called a label, and it's a verbal observation, and it lands well in the brain. It doesn't feel like a question, even though it's often an inquiry. You know, if I want to get a response from you that triggers your thinking, simultaneously triggers your thinking, makes you feel listened to, and then I want an unvarnished answer. If I put it in the terms of a label or verbal observation, it looks like, sounds like, seems like, feels like, it triggers your thinking. It feels collaborative to you. And it actually triggers the thinking of the people around you. There's something about it that triggers people's analytical thinking. You know, you contemplate it, and then you come right back without thinking about your answer first. And what do I mean by that? You ask me a question, and I say, what do you mean by that? What makes you ask? Because the question behind the question is often more important. You'll stop and think about what makes you ask. You go into a quadrant of your brain, for lack of a better term, where you think deeply. And you'll consider the response, and after you've considered it, you'll give me an answer. Now, that requires a lot of energy on your part, and I may not want you to filter the answer. So instead of saying, what makes you ask, if I say, seems like you have a reason for asking, you'll come right back with the answer. You're triggered with no mental effort, which is particularly important at the end of the day when you're tired, because you can't answer a good what question when you're tired. You're just going to like, oh, God. You just answer the freaking question. It doesn't matter why I ask. I want an answer. You know, give me an answer when you're tired. So the label hits your brain in a different way. I don't know why. I just know it does.
Chris, in addition to labeling, there's a term mislabeling. Yeah. And I have found mislabeling in a negotiation or a conversation, I really want to test something on them and see if there really is an issue. And when I've done that, the majority of the time it comes additional information that I didn't even know about came out when I mislabeled. Could you describe to the group what's mislabeling and when you should use that?
Yeah, it's this great unintended consequence that's always in your favor. People are afraid to label because they're afraid they're going to get it wrong. You know, if I label this and I get it wrong, they're going to yell at me. Well, first of all, that flies in the face of empathy, because you're getting too self-centered if you're getting yelled at, if you're embarrassed. You're self-centered, you're not focusing on the other person. But the mislabel triggers extra information. There's something about correcting, and correcting as a result of a label. Correcting is very satisfying on the part of the user, which makes it a great emotional intelligence thing to kick into gear, because I want you to feel satisfied with the conversation. If it's really about you and about how I'm getting you to feel, if I mislabel and you correct me, you're going to feel good. You're going to love it. You're going to want more. And typically, people correct with unvarnished truth. And they probably correct with stuff that maybe they shouldn't have told you. And it ends up being this great mechanism for getting closely held information that they don't regret telling you. Like if I ask you a question, or if I corner you with questions, and I pry something out of you, and I get that closely held information, via that method, chances are very high you're going to regret it. It's going to diminish our relationship. You're going to change things around. The value of that information is going to decrease. All these bad things happen if I pry information out of you. But if I get it out of you based on a correction, you know the old phrase, people don't remember what they said or what you said, they remember how they felt. You'll retain the feeling of correction, which is satisfying. You want more of it. You want to correct some more. And we get people in negotiations all the time intentionally mislabeling to quickly get closely held information that the other side is never going to regret sharing.
Brilliant. I imagine in order to label or mislabel, you've got to, as you're entering a negotiation, you at least have to have some sense of what the other party is interested in, or what they're coming to the table with. And correct me if I'm wrong there, but if that's true, are there any effective ways of teasing that out early on so that you are equipped to be able to mislabel or label? I guess mislabeling you it's a way of teasing it out what they want, but is there any way of effectively learning quickly what someone wants in a negotiation so that you can label?
Well, you could spend too much time researching. That's the three types of negotiators, three types of people that how they approach conflict globally. Fight, flight, make friends. We have plenty of reason for contending that the world splits evenly into thirds. Doesn't matter if you're Asian, Western European, African American, African, Hispanic. It doesn't matter. We've seen the world split pretty evenly into types. Of those three types, the analysts want to research like crazy before they come to the table. Let me find out everything about this person. Problem with that is you'll spend a month researching stuff you could have triggered at the table in and out. And if you're working for me, I don't want you to spend a month getting ready to go to the table. I want you to spend a day, an afternoon. I'm going to want you to get to the table because it gets information fast. So do some research. Just don't get crazy wanting to know everything. Now, when you get into it, use labels fearlessly. If they land, the other side's going to love it because you were listening. If it's a mislabel, the other side's going to love it because they get to correct. So, don't be afraid of your labels. Try to label them accurately, but you're not going to get them all accurate. And then what you want to do is look for affect shifts. What do I mean by an affect shift? Somebody's body language changes at all. Eye movement changes. There's a hesitation. They look down. They look up. Any physical change at all that appears to be connected to their thought pattern. Now, this happens to be one of the reasons why we don't teach body language. Because your guess at what emotion or thought is triggering that affect shift, that physical change, is if you're really good, it's right 1/3 of the time. Which means you're usually wrong.
Yeah.
So instead of guessing, you label it. And you say something is innocuous. It seems like something just crossed your mind. Or it seems like you had a thought. Or seems like you reacted to that. Let them tell you what it is. I'm listening to, you guys mentioned Andrew Huberman. I'm listening to one of his podcasts. Big fan of Andrew.
Same.
Consider him a friend. He's a great guy. Flattered and honored to have been on his podcast at all. He's talking to a psychologist, and they happen to get into body language, smart woman. And she says, yeah, when somebody's frowning, we've run the data, and if they're frowning, you can accurately guess that they're angry about 1/3 of the time. And she said, basically, that's not a bad percentage. But it's still only 1/3 of the time. Now, they could be frowning because they're angry. It could be frowning because they got gas. And if your body language class taught you a frown means anger and you react as if they're angry without finding out, you're an idiot.
Yep.
Because they got gas.
Yep.
So, the third type is like when I tend to frown when I'm listening intently. I refer to it as my resting serial killing face.
I like that one.
I look at you with such intensity. I had one speaker tell me, "You scared me." And we're in a small group. She's speaking to a small group. I'm listening intently because she was phenomenal. And she came up to me later when we were talking, and finally she says, I got to tell you, you scared the hell out of me.
She should have said, seems like you're upset with me about something.
Yeah, there you go, right? If she'd only known later.
Yeah.
So, label the body language. Label every change in the body language. Seems like something just crossed your mind. Find out what it is in a way that makes them want to tell you.
Now, is it going off that thought, if you are labeling someone's body change, or if they look left or look right, is it then safe to ascribe that change of body language going forward? So if they always look left, you now know because they've already affirmed it or denied what that meant?
Well, it's a little safer. I'd still want to label. The last time when they looked left, it meant they were considering. And so if they look left again, I might say, it seems like I hit the mark. I'm still labeling in general enough terms to stimulate thinking with everybody involved. I heard Sam Harris on a podcast refer to empathy as a species of reason. And I thought, yeah, there's a lot of this has to do with introspection and analysis. Let me actually pay attention to how you're reacting. Let me do a minimal amount of analysis on it, and then let's kind of analyze it collaboratively. And so the more analysis I get, the more accurate my guesses are going to be. And still, at the same time, you're not 100% sure. My son Brandon, brilliant negotiator, goes dead silent when he's thinking, and he goes dead silent when he's angry. And so I'll say, seems like you're thinking about this, just to make sure, especially if we're on the phone. Like dead silence with him, like he could be wanting to strangle the life out of me, or he could be in complete agreement and triggering great thoughts. Since I can't see him, I got to label and guess.
Yeah, he'd have thought that what you said was the wisest thing he's ever heard, and he's contemplating its magnitude, or has disdain for you at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially with your offspring, right? Your children. Right. You never know.
You had used the word empathy there, and I've heard you. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've heard you say that empathy is you don't quite need to agree with whatever you're hearing or whatever the other person's saying, but you do need to understand where it is they're coming from. How important is empathy in effective negotiation? Do you have to come to an understanding of where they're coming from in order to negotiate well? Is that a prerequisite, or can you still do it without that level of empathy?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So how can you make a great deal if you don't know where they're coming from? It's kind of impossible. And I'm looking to make a great deal. I'm looking to make a great deal with everybody I talk to that they stick with, or I want to know what they think a great deal is so that I can make an informed decision on whether or not I'm going to accept. And so you'll never make great deals without knowing where the other side's coming from. Is there an emotional satisfaction here? Is there a critical component to the deal that without it, it's going to fall apart for them? If you look at it as just understanding how they see it and where they're coming from, I would contend that without that perspective, it's impossible to make an A+ deal. And I'm only interested in great deals. Mediocre deals are expensive. They're full of renegotiations. They cost way more than whatever you thought you were going to get out of it, because it's going to be implemented in a very sloppy fashion, and you're going to have a lot of time spent renegotiating and fixing it. Like if you give me full price on a lousy deal, I'm probably taking a 50% pay cut because the implementation is going to be so bad. So I'm only interested in making great deals.
Chris, you mentioned the three personalities: fight, flight, or friend. Myself personally, I would much rather negotiate with a tough person that knows what they want than someone that doesn't, or is giving off signals that I've got to go back to my boss, or I've got to get additional information. And remember, you made the comment in your book, or it was on the mastermind, that usually the person that says they have to go back and get approval from the boss is usually the person that can make the decision right then and there, as compared to the one who wants to make the decision and he really doesn't have to. Can you elaborate on that and help people like me that love a tougher negotiator than someone that's kind of hard to read?
Yeah, that's there's a lot of good stuff in there. So each type, fight, flight, make friends, sort of analytical, accommodate. To really be a full top tier, top performing A+ player, you need elements of both. You're born with elements of one. You need to learn the elements of the other. And the assertive, somebody that knows what they want. Like, how the hell can you make a great deal if you don't know what they want? You know, if you never tell me what you want, you're making me guess, which decreases the chances that you're going to get what you want, which decreases the chances that we'll implement, and will severely decrease the chances that you will ever deal with me again. Because you kept it a secret. You made me guess.
Not helpful for anyone.
Yeah, so, you know, I love the fact that you prefer somebody who tells you what they want. Now, then, the next thing, like, are they deferring in the negotiation? You know, the more they defer to people that are not in the room, it's a great way to buy time to think about stuff when they're actually the one that wants to make the decision. You don't want 36 hours, they want 72 hours. I love the people that are constantly talking about who they're deferring to. You know, I got a board of directors, I'm scared of my boss. Any of these.
Have to talk to my wife or whatever that is.
Yeah. All right, cool. I'm probably talking to the most influential person here, or has significant influence. I love that, because now I can start asking questions. If they feel like they're not getting pinned down, I can say something like, how's this going in the past? How did it break down in the past? What else have you tried? Who else does this affect? How do they feel about it? You know, the person who's deferring, what they are is trying to tell you their team is important to them. You start asking about their team, they're like, oh, okay. Maybe they're not trying to corner me. Maybe they are trying to make a great deal. So understanding how influential the person is that I'm talking to at the moment, you know, the decision maker, the DM, that's the biggest fallacy, because a great decision maker is going to defer to their team, and they got deal killers. I'm more interested in the deal killer than the decision maker, because the decision maker has got to, even if he doesn't want to go to his team for the decision, they're going to torpedo the deal when they get the chance. So they're still going to kill the deal anyway. You know, the deal killers are very important. If somebody's deferring to other people, you may be talking to the deal killer, which is a really valuable source of information.
I'd love to hear how you prepare to negotiate. Now, you know, when most people hear the word negotiation, they're thinking hostage situation, they're thinking business deal. But as you've pointed out, negotiations are happening at all the times. You know, whether you're talking to your spouse about which restaurant you're going to go to, or you're brokering an actual business deal. So let's just set up an example in which you already know you're going to go into brokering your business deal, right? You're going to negotiate a contract. Is there anything you do specifically to prepare for that? Or are you preparing every day with just every interaction, and therefore when you show up to any negotiation, you're pretty ready and limber and ready to go?
Well, I'm constantly practicing my emotional reads, because I'm going to need to do an emotional read in the negotiation. So I'm always practicing that, or discussion about the negotiation on my side is going to help me interact with the other side. You know, whatever it's going to take me to get in tune to the signals that the other side's sending off. And I happen to be we're going into an important negotiation the other day. I've always sort of been triggered by the word generous, when the other side says they're being generous.
Generous?
Yeah. Typically, when the other side says they're being generous, what they're really doing is they're grabbing, they're just not grabbing with both hands, but they're being assertive, which triggers me, because, you know, I get triggered.
Don't want to be strong-armed.
And then what they're saying is like, all right, we're being aggressive, but we could have been more aggressive, so we're actually doing you a favor. Mm-hmm. And to me, that ain't a favor. But what I didn't realize until I was having this conversation with one of my teammates before negotiation, and part of the prep is talking about it with your team. We get into the negotiation, and I'll say the problem with being generous is you've compromised before you've gotten to the table. You know you have, and you're expecting appreciation, and the other side never appreciates it. You know, you defeated yourself before you got to the table, and they're not going to care because they didn't know. So at the table, and sure enough, one of the persons says, you know, it's a generous offer. Now, and I realize that in rejecting this, I got to be really careful. Because I realize, all right, so what they're telling me without realizing it is they've already compromised. They're expecting some appreciation. And I got to appreciate the fact that they could have been harsher and that they put in work on this before I reject it. I gotta express some appreciation. So at that point in time, I'm like, oh man, I missed how hard they've worked on this as a team. So I said to them in the midst, look, I realize you guys have been working really hard on this. I realize there's a much more aggressive approach you could have taken. And you put in a lot of effort to come to this. And I just want you to know that I appreciate how hard you guys have been working.
It's good.
And the significant players on the other side of the table relaxed, and that's when they said, "All right, we'll take." Because I didn't reject it outright, but at that point in time, they said, "We'll take this back and we'll take another." I'm like, "Cool." It was their idea, and then what I did was I had a member of my team follow up immediately thereafter with another email saying, "Thank you for how hard you guys are working on this," and the response at that counterpart level was, that was a really kind note. So there's got to be preparation. What's the answer to your question? You got to have some discussion with your team about it in advance. You got to not compromise in advance. But as you go through your process, have some appreciation for the other side's going through a similar process, and then look out for it and express appreciation for their hard work when you get to the table. Whatever gets you in tune, emotion is going to be, never mind the terms. Get in tune emotionally with where the other side may be coming from, because they're going to need that at the table. They're going to feel exposed. They're going to feel vulnerable. They're going to feel like they're hanging themselves out there. The more you appreciate that, the more they're going to want to make a great deal with you.
The reason I asked that question, that's a great answer. Thanks for that. The reason I asked that question, and the one before about empathy and how important it is in any negotiation, is because I wonder, is there anything we should do as we enter a hard conversation negotiation that we should be doing to prepare the other side of the table for negotiation? And sort of a little context behind that is I've been in a couple negotiations where the other party did not care what I wanted. They didn't ask. They had their mind made up of what they wanted out of this thing, could not care less what I had in mind. And so I wonder, is there any way that we could prepare their mind or get their mind in the right place to come to the table and negotiate?
You know, if nothing else, I'd express appreciation for their hard work in advance. Because it's a subjective measure of how hard they've worked on it, but they're going to feel like they worked on it. You know, you may put 10 times the amount of work in, and they maybe did 10 times the amount of research, but they're going to think they worked hard on it. And empathy is about how the other side sees it. It's not about the truth. It's not about your objective analysis. Empathy is about how the other side sees it. And I promise you, they're gonna think they worked hard. They're gonna think they could have been bigger jerks. They could have been more aggressive. They could have taken other opportunities. You know, they focus down on you. They think you should be grateful that they're talking to you at all. And you can say something like, in advance, look, we're grateful for how hard you've worked on this. We know you have other options. And we're grateful that you're talking with us. Because that's the way they're going to see it. And they're going to feel like, you understand us. We can collaborate.
That's good.
Chris, it's funny that you're talking about this because I've been in a couple negotiations similar to what Jake was talking about, that their position was so firm and you felt like you couldn't get anything. I mean, there was no win. It was win-lose. There was not going to be a win-win, and which was really interesting. But during that negotiating process, I used some no-oriented questions. And it seemed to open up the door a little bit and made the other party kind of think about it. No, that's not unreasonable. No, that's not inconvenient. What is a no-oriented question?
Yeah. Well done, first of all. I mean, that's a lot of people are scared to death to do it. So the vast majority of questions everybody asks are just simple yes-oriented questions. Now, they're either trying to manipulate the other side, walking down a path, or simply get a confirmation. You could be asking a yes-oriented question just for confirmation. You mean it respectfully. You don't mean manipulation by it. Problem is, the people that are manipulating ask yes-oriented questions. You want success? Do you want to make more money? Do you want to be happy? Do you want to get discounts on everything? Do you want to travel the world, stay in 5-star hotels for free? All those nonsensical questions. Those are manipulative. They're called microagreements or tie downs. They violate the other person's autonomy. And it's what most salespeople learn because they can't make any sales. They got no ability. And so they learn yes-oriented questions, the yes trap, the yes momentum. And they start making some sales. They go from being an F player to a D player, even a C player. Like if you're focused on yes, you might become a C player. And you don't know you're a C player. You just remember what it used to be like when you were an F player. You were getting fired. If you're getting F grades in college, they kick you out of school. If you raise the level of your performance to you're getting C's, you don't get kicked out of school and you graduate. And you think, look at how much better I got. You just have no idea on a bell curve. You got so much farther to go. And I think that's why people have a tendency to really get addicted to getting yes as an answer. Plus, we love hearing it. And you think yes is success. And when you hear yes, the angels sing, the heavens part. It's wonderful. Birds chirp.
And that's usually, if you take any negotiation classes online or in person, about 90% of them want you to get that yes. Yep. The more yeses you get, the better it turns out. Well, that's not true. So
yeah, it's such nonsense. But I happen to love that all of our competitors are teaching it, right? Because then, like, if you learn from me, you got an automatic competitive advantage over these people. The competitive advantage is insane. It happens so quick if you can switch from yes to no. And it is going from do you agree to do you disagree? Do you like this idea? Is this a ridiculous idea? It takes some practice, though, because the wiring, you're so ingrained to ask a yes question. It's insidious how much of a habit it is and how much you think yes is success. And everybody says, well, no is failure. No is horrible. You want to avoid no at all costs. No is mutual assured destructions. The Russians launching nukes on the Americans firing back, and we're all going to die. They're just atomic holocaust from no.
And it's easy.
But people feel safe when they say no. And it takes a while to grasp it. And you start looking around and you see it and you're like, wow, what happens if I make them feel safe? Do you disagree? They'll be like, no, I don't disagree. And if there's still obstacles, they'll tell you the obstacles, because the real issue is what they say after the word. Every time people are taught that whenever they say yes, they've dug themselves in deeper. And so they're not going to give you valuable information after they've said yes. People are taught when they say no, they're protected themselves. They're safe. They're not afraid of digging themselves in deeper. They'll say, no, I don't disagree, but I need the following things out of you. Boom, you got what looks like it to be a great agreement. If you can do them, great. If you can't, cool. At least you know. And I'm really impressed that you adopted it, because some people have the worst time switching from yes to no.
I can tell. Well, and I've also had training with Troy Smith. With
Yeah.
so you, I was one of your clients, and in a tough negotiation that I had going on, and Troy Smith helped me a lot in how to process
Troy
that.
is one of the
Yeah.
superstar Black Swan coaches. He is got a worldwide following of people that love to be coached by him. He's a genius.
It was great.
Chris, I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking about negotiating and conversations that go a little bit more personal, maybe on with your spouse or a relative or your children. Do tactic? And let me give you some context. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old and a wife. Do tactics change?
You're surrounded.
I'm surrounded. As I say, I'm a minority in a sorority.
They're all girls.
They're all
huh?
girls, all girls, and all our pets are female as well. Do your tactics change when you're engaging with somebody in a more personal relationship? Do you approach that uniquely differently than, let's say, a business negotiation?
No, the tactics don't change. The application of them will change a little bit. So let's take anger, for example. On a hotline as a hostage negotiator, in most instances, I can say you sound angry. You seem angry. That's a tentative inquiry. And I'm letting you know it's what I'm hearing, I'm seeing. And I'm not 100% sure. But the spouse is somebody that you've had a lot more contact with. There's certain things they don't want you to be tentative about. And, more advanced version, and this is real tricky, is to say, I know you're angry. They don't want you to wonder, they want you to know. And there's certain professional circumstances that encompasses as well. There's kind of 3 levels to the martial art of negotiations, if you will, and we borrowed this term from martial arts. There's Shu, Ha, and Ri. Shu is the beginner level, Ha is intermediate, and Ri is you're in a flow state, you're an expert, you're a master. It's just coming to you. It's very hard to stay in Ri. I like to think I'm consistently in Ha, occasionally in Ri. But I know you're angry is a much Ha or even Ri level label. Now, you got to be careful with the word I, because I is a self-centering word. And I would never say what I'm hearing is that you're angry, because that's tentative and that's too lengthy. And there's a bunch of other things wrong with the construction of that. And unfortunately, a lot of psychologists and therapists will say, I hear anger. What I'm hearing is, what they're really just trying to do is exert control with that phraseology. So there's a difference in how many words, what words accompany the word I tends to be self-centered. But there's going to be times with a spouse where he or she is going to want you to say, I know you're angry. And even from their perspective, if you participated in the contributing circumstances, and you got to say, I know I've made you angry. That's empathy from their perspective. Not only do you know it, but as far as they're concerned, you respond to it. And that's where the evolution changes. And some books will tell you otherwise. And if they say, this empathy works, it just doesn't work at home, they just haven't learned it well enough. Why should your significant others not want you to genuinely know where they're coming from? It's insane to say that. It's just understanding how their perspective has evolved based on their position in life to you and how much contact you've had with them.
That's good. Chris, I would love to, this book does not need to be propped up anymore because it's a phenomenal book. But the one thing I will say is this could be categorized as a relationship book as well. And I'll tell you why. I brought up my wife to say also is I've always been in business. So I've always been in negotiations. I've always been in contract discussions and, things like that. My wife could be the further from that. My wife read this book and she said she walked away learning so much more about who I am and how I communicate and how she can communicate with me, this actually made our relationship better. So I want to give that remark for you. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it was actually a relationship builder for my wife and I.
I love it. I love that. To me, that's just an indicator of two people trying really hard to understand each other for the betterment of your relationship
Yep.
and both of you. So I think that's cool.
Yep. Appreciate that. Well, I would love to, I can see it right over your back shoulder, the Full Fee Agents. This is your newest book. There you go, Steve. Your newest book. I'd love to hear how that came about. And, you're really diving into the real estate world with this. And can you talk to us a little bit about that and how you got into the real estate side of things?
Yeah, well, about 7 years ago, my son Brandon says, you got to talk to this guy, Steve Scholl. He's a good guy. I'm like, all right, that's good enough recommendation for me. And Steve Scholl is in the Los Angeles area coaching real estate agents. Very successful on the old format.
Yes.
Yes, convince, presentation, listing presentations, all the nonsense. And Steve was just like a work hard guy. Outwork everybody, and you'll be successful. And every aspect of his life showed it. He played in the NFL. He got an MBA after that. He was on Wall Street, made a lot of money on Wall Street, became a real estate agent himself, got good at it. And since he played in the NFL and loved great coaches, wanted to coach people. But by sheer hard work and determination, successful at every level. And he reads Never Split the Difference. And he's like, man, I'm a C player, and we got to be A players. The application of empathy. This is a total paradigm shift. So he reaches out and we start coaching real estate agents together with a whole new format. And the agents are making more money and working less. Like some agents have reported working 80% less and making the same amount of money. Insane.
Wow.
And very much like Never Split the Difference, after we made a bunch of people really successful with a whole new paradigm, a whole new philosophy, a whole new language, then we decided to pull a book together. And we pulled the Full Fee Agent together. Real estate agents at full fee or a bargain. Because the finder's fee in business is 10%. Real estate agents, before this lawsuit and settlement, which kind of threw the percentages out the window, they're making 6 when everybody else is making 10 for less work. And most of them are compromising their fees. I'm like, you guys are crazy. You're a bargain at 6. Don't cut your price. Work smarter. And the book came out about 1.5 years ago. It's done really well. We're spreading the gospel. As it turns out, the Full Fee Agent, I've had lawyers come up to me and say, I realize this is a book for residential real estate, but it's really helped me practice in law because it's putting a new take on tactical empathy and emotional intelligence. And so it's a great supplement to them. We actually just held our first conference for real estate agents in LA a week and a half ago. It was phenomenal. I gave away a car.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, just I love red. Yeah, my Forerunners, which is in the book of Salsa Red Pearl, and I picked up this Salsa Red Chevy Traverse, great SUV, great vehicle, and I'm like, you know what, we're going to give this baby away to the person who has the best story of how the skills have changed their life. So at the end of the second day, gave it away to one of the attendees. She started crying on stage.
So good.
When she started talking about the impact using the skills that it had on her life. So, we're gonna have the conference again next year. It'll be in the springtime, and probably give away another
Salsa Red vehicle, right?
Chris,
something red. I'm sorry. You're gonna. If you want my car, it's gonna be.
I'll
red.
take it.
Chris, one of the things that you mentioned at conference, and one of the things with Never Split the Difference or the Full Fee Agent, is that you can't expect to read the book and then it's all in your brain. You have to practice and practice, and you're going to make mistakes. And when I go back to Troy Smith and with the private consulting, one of the things he did was masterfully is that helped me through the process. So I felt comfortable and confident in my negotiating skills, and I'm learning all the time. And I can say, hands down, anybody listen to this, highly recommend reaching out to you guys. And if you got a private consultation, private negotiating skills, it was absolutely fabulous. I can't tell enough people about it that if you got that situation, go right there and do a one-on-one. And you've got quite a few other conferences going on too, other than just the real estate one. Is that true?
Yeah, we got live in-person training. We got something coming up in Philadelphia pretty soon. We're going to be in Dallas. We bounce around the country a little bit, and the live training is phenomenal. And so, yeah, plenty of opportunity. I mean, you want to get into it. You study it how you can. You practice, and then the live training is an immersion. And then you get surrounded by people that become your tribe and help you get better at it and share their skills. And there's a great community feeling with people that are wanting to be successful, make the world a better place, and make just a pretty darn good living while they're at it.
I love that. Couldn't agree more. Well, Chris, your time is incredibly valuable, and we're just so grateful that you'd spend just a couple minutes with us today. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, if they want to get a hold of your team, where can they find you?
Best thing to do is subscribe to our newsletter. Our website is blackswanltd.com, BlackSwanLTD.com.
Love it.
As soon as you go there, you should see the opportunity to subscribe to the newsletter. It's complimentary. But better than that, it's actionable and it's concise. You give us your email, we'll give you a single usable article to read on Tuesday morning. It gets delivered to your inbox. The bonus on top of that is it's the gateway to everything. You'll find out when we're in Philly or Dallas or LA. You'll find out what we got upcoming. And it's a great step to continue to accelerate your ability. So subscribing to the newsletter is really where you're going to, if you want to keep going, like if you want to find out how much fun this is, subscribing to the newsletter is a great step after you've read it.
Perfect. Well, and we'll link everything in the show notes. And if you haven't read any of Chris's books, please pick them up. But again, Chris, thanks for joining us. We absolutely loved spending time with you today.
Gentlemen, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.